Have you ever stopped to think about what makes someone simply swerve to avoid a problem and keep driving? Imagine the scene. A busy road, cars speeding by, the deafening roar of engines cutting through the air. And there, on the edge of the asphalt, two small, defenseless beings, two puppies crying desperately, not understanding why they were left behind. A car passes, swerves. Another comes right behind, swerves too. And another, and another. Nobody brakes. Nobody stops. It's as if those frightened little eyes were invisible. As if the desperate cries didn't echo loudly enough to touch the hearts of passersby. The question remains, why? Why is it so easy to look away and move on? Why do those two beings, so vulnerable and so dependent on a gesture of compassion, remain there, exposed to danger, while life continues its fast pace around them? Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever seen something similar and felt that tightness in your chest, that urge to do something, but ended up moving on because you were in a hurry, because you didn't know what to do, or simply because, well, because everyone else was doing the same thing? The truth is that situations like this happen every day, everywhere. And what's most disturbing is that, most of the time, these animals aren't there by chance. They were abandoned, deliberately left on the side of busy roads, as if they were disposable objects, as if their lives had no value whatsoever. And while cars pass by, while people go about their routines, those little hearts beat fast, full of fear, cold, and hunger. They don't understand what they did wrong. They don't understand why they were left behind. All they know is that they are alone, vulnerable, and at the mercy of fate. But stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you and perhaps even make you rethink how you view small acts of courage. Because while dozens, maybe hundreds of people pass by those puppies without stopping, someone finally made a different decision. Someone saw beyond the rush of daily life. Someone slowed down. And that decision, that simple act of stopping, changed everything. Not only for those two defenseless puppies, but also for the person who had the courage to act when everyone else just turned away. Because saving a life isn't just about the rescue itself. It's about recognizing that every being matters. It's about choosing compassion over indifference. It's about understanding that sometimes all that separates tragedy from hope is a single person willing to make a difference. So, while those puppies remained there, crying by the roadside, surrounded by the constant danger of the vehicles that passed ever closer, their fate was about to change. And what happened next? So, while those puppies remained there, crying by the roadside, surrounded by the constant danger of the vehicles that passed ever closer, their fate was about to change. And what happened next? But before I tell you how this story unfolded, I need to ask you a question. How many times have you felt that pang in your heart when faced with a situation like this? That impulse to want to do something, but which ends up being stifled by the rush, the doubt, or simply the fear of not knowing how to act. If this topic resonates with you, if you've experienced something similar, or if you're touched by stories of rescue and compassion, leave a comment below about what has impacted you the most so far. I truly read each and every one of them, and I love knowing what you think, what you feel, because this exchange is what gives life to this space. And look, if you're enjoying this content, if you're feeling this connection with the story I'm telling you, I invite you to leave a like on the video. It may seem like a small gesture, but it's what shows the algorithm that it's worthwhile to spread this message to more people. That's how stories like this, stories of hope, of courage, of animals that were saved against all odds, manage to reach people who truly care. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. People who, like you, believe that every life matters. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, I invite you to hit that subscribe button right now. Because here we don't just bring exciting stories, we bring truth. We bring purpose. We bring the certainty that small actions can generate big transformations. And I want you to be part of this community, this family that chooses to see the world with more empathy and less indifference. Now, going back to those two puppies by the side of the road. The scene was heartbreaking. They were there, standing, trembling, their eyes fixed on every passing car, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to finally stop. And that, for many people, is extremely uncomfortable. But here's the hidden truth behind this collective inaction. It's not that people are bad. It's not that they don't care. The problem is that we live in a culture that teaches us to deflect, to move on, to not interfere. We learn, from a young age, that the world is every man for himself. That there's a limit to what is our responsibility and what is the responsibility of others. And when everyone thinks like that, you know what happens. Nobody acts. Because everyone thinks someone else will do it. And meanwhile, lives hanged by a thread. And the most intriguing thing about this whole story is that those two puppies didn't run away. They didn't flinch when cars passed inches from them. They didn't try to hide in the bushes. They simply stood there, motionless, as if waiting for something or someone. And this raises a question that many people do on stop to think about. Were they really abandoned there? Or was there something deeper happening? Something that only those who decided to stop and observe closely could understand. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this story isn't just about two puppies on the side of a road. It's about the decisions we make every day. It's about the transformation that happens when we choose to stop, instead of turning away. It's about the impact a single gesture can have, not only on the life of the one rescued, but also on the life of the one who rescues. Because saving a life isn't an isolated act. It's a journey. It's a change of perspective. It asks the certainty that you chose to be different, in a world that taught you to be the same. And those puppies, even in the face of constant danger, even ignored by dozens of people, remained there, crying, waiting, as if they knew, deep down, that someone would come. As if hope was the only thing that still kept them standing. And it was precisely this hope that made all the difference, when finally, someone had the courage to break. But when that person approached, something strange began to happen. Something that didn't make sense at first glance. Because if those puppies had truly been abandoned, if they were merely lost or frightened, their behavior would be completely different. They would run after the cars, try to attract attention in any way, or simply flee from the danger. But no, they did none of that. On the contrary, they stood there, motionless, but with their eyes fixed in a specific direction. And that direction wasn't towards the passing cars. It was something further ahead. A curve in the road. Now think about it. Why would two frightened, vulnerable puppies, surrounded by speeding vehicles, keep staring intently at a curve in the road? What kind of instinct, what kind of connection, would make them stay in that place, even risking their lives? The truth is that there is an animal intelligence that we often underestimate. We tend to think that animals act only on impulse, out of fear, out of hunger. But there is something much deeper happening. There is loyalty, there is love. There is a type of decision that goes beyond human logic. Because it's not about calculation, it's about pure feeling. And that's exactly what began to unfold when the person who stopped decided to take a closer look. Because while one of the puppies remained there, whimpering softly, the other did something even more intriguing. It would walk a few meters to the side of the road, as if heading towards something or someone. And then, suddenly, it would come running back. Even more desperate, whimpering louder, as if trying to communicate something urgent. As if saying, "I need your help. You need to come with me. There's something here you need to see." This behavior is not random. It's not a matter of chance. It's a clear demonstration that those puppies weren't there because they were abandoned. They were there because something held them captive in that place. Something that, for them, was more important than their own safety. And when you stop to think about it, when you truly absorb the weight of this revelation, the whole story changes. It ceases to be just another rescue of abandoned animals and transforms into something much bigger. Something that makes us question, to what extent do we truly understand what goes on in the mind and heart of an animal? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened next was a real turning point in the journey of those puppies and of the person who decided to help them. Because when that person finally understood what the puppies were trying to communicate, when she followed their gaze toward the bend, when she allowed herself to trust that seemingly meaningless behavior, everything began to make sense. And what she found there, hidden on the roadside, completely changed the narrative of that story. Because they weren't just two puppies alone. They weren't just two abandoned animals waiting for help. There was something more. Something that explained why they didn't run away. Why they stayed there, even with the imminent danger. Why one of them would go inside and come running back, desperate, as if asking for help, not only for itself, but for someone who couldn't move. And when you discover what was really happening, when you understand the depth of that loyalty, that unconditional love, it's impossible not to be moved. It's impossible not to rethink everything we believe we know about compassion, about family, about what really matters. But while this revelation began to take shape, While the person who stopped tried to process what they were seeing, the situation on the road was becoming increasingly dangerous. Because it wasn't just cars passing by, it was trucks, heavy vehicles, at high speed, unable to brake in time if something got in their way. And those two puppies remained there, exposed, vulnerable, just inches from tragedy. With each passing second, the tension increased. The deafening roar of the engines, the wind shaking the puppies' small bodies, the dust kicked up by the giant wheels, everything conspired against them. And then what everyone feared happened. A truck passed so close to one of the puppies that it missed by millimeters. It was a matter of luck, a last-minute reflex, a silent miracle that could easily have been avoided. And the worst part was that it could happen again at any moment. In fact, it was almost certain that it would. It was only a matter of time. This is the part of the story that many people don't think about when they see an animal in the street. We look, we feel pity, but we don't grasp the real risk. We don't imagine how much each second counts. We don't visualize the literal impact of a vehicle at high speed against such a fragile body. And the truth is that, at that moment, the decision to act was no longer a moral or emotional choice. It was a matter of life or death. It was now or never. Because if that person who stopped had hesitated for a few more minutes, if they had doubted their own instincts, if they had waited for someone else to appear and solve the problem, perhaps this story would have had a completely different ending, an ending that nobody would want to hear. But what makes this situation even more desperate is that the puppies weren't trying to run away. Even with the danger so close, even with the trucks passing inches from them, they didn't abandon that place. They kept looking ahead, towards that curve, as if something there was more important than their own lives. And that's what transforms this story into something far beyond a simple rescue. That's what reveals the true nature of loyalty. Because we, human beings, like to think that we are rational, that we make decisions based on logic, on survival. But these puppies were showing something that we often forget. That love, loyalty, the true connection with those we love, surpasses any instinct for self-preservation. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in that moment of extreme tension was decisive. The person who stopped needed to act quickly. They needed to trust their own judgment. They needed to take a risk. Because they couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. They couldn't wait for someone better prepared to appear. It was them or nobody. And when you find yourself in a situation like that, when the fate of other beings depends on your courage, you discover things about yourself that you may not even have known existed. You discover what you are capable of. You discover that, ultimately, the difference between a hero and a witness is just a decision. A choice that needs to be made in a fraction of a second, but that carries a weight that lasts forever. And there, on that dangerous shoulder of the road, with trucks speeding past, with two puppies refusing to budge, this person was about to discover exactly what kept them there. What made them risk everything. What made that piece of land more valuable than their own safety. And there, on that dangerous shoulder of the road, with trucks speeding past, with two puppies refusing to budge, this person was about to discover exactly what kept them there. What made them risk everything. What made that piece of ground more valuable than their own safety. And it was at that moment that something changed. Finally, a driver pulled over. Finally, someone had the courage to stop. It wasn't by chance. It wasn't because I had time to spare. It was because something inside that person spoke louder than the rush, the fear, the easy excuse of moving on. It was a conscious decision. A choice to be present. To be part of the solution. To not just be another one who swerved and pretended not to see. But the interesting thing is that when this person approached the puppies, when they tried to do what seemed most obvious to remove those little animals from the side of the road, to put them in a safe place away from imminent danger, they didn't cooperate. They resisted. And it wasn't aggressive resistance. It wasn't fear of humans. It was something completely different. It was almost as if they were saying, "No, you don't understand. You're not supposed to take me away from here. You're supposed to come with me." And that's exactly what happened. One of the puppies, small, fragile, still trembling with fear, did something few animals would do. It grabbed the person's trouser leg with its mouth and began to pull. It wasn't an aggressive pull. It was a plea. It was a silent supplication. It was a desperate gesture from someone who knows they can't solve it alone, but who also can't give up. And think about the emotional weight of that moment. Think about the impact it has, because when an animal asks you for help in that way, when it breaks through that invisible barrier between fear and trust, between instinct and communication, something changes inside you. You stop being just an observer. You become part of that story. You understand that there's no going back. You can't think, "It's not my problem anymore," because now it is. Because that little being chose to trust you, chose to believe that you are different, that you will understand, that you will follow through. And that's what the person did. She followed. She let the puppy guide her. She trusted that seemingly strange behavior, that insistence, that refusal to leave that place. And as she walked, as she approached the bend the puppies kept staring at, the hidden truth began to reveal itself. The behind-the-scenes events of that apparent abandonment began to make sense. And what she found there, hidden among the bushes on the roadside, explained everything. Something that completely transformed the narrative. Something that showed that those puppies were not victims of abandonment. They were heroes of a journey far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Because there, fallen, injured, unable to move, was their mother. And everything fell into place. Everything made sense. The puppies weren't lost. They weren't disoriented. They were there because she was there. They didn't run away because she couldn't run away. They didn't leave that place because abandoning her would mean letting her die alone. And while dozens of cars passed by, while the danger increased every second, those two little beings did the only thing they knew how to do. They stayed. They protected. They waited. They trusted that, eventually, someone would understand. And that person did understand. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happens from here on out isn't just about saving 3 animals from a dangerous situation. It's about what this story teaches us about loyalty, about unconditional love, about the strength that exists in not giving up on those we love, even when everything seems lost. It's about the transformation that happens when we decide to be the person who stops. It's about the transformation that happens when we decide to be the person who stops. And that's exactly what happened at that moment. The person followed the puppies. She trusted them. She allowed herself to be guided by those two little beings who, even in the face of chaos, knew exactly what they were doing. And as she walked along the side of the road, as she moved away from the heavy traffic, as she advanced a few meters ahead out of the field of vision of the passing cars, something completely unexpected began to reveal itself. Something that would change not only the course of that story, but the very understanding of what was really happening there. Because what she found wasn't just the mother of the puppies. What she saw was a scene that took her breath away. There, hidden in a ditch, out of sight of those passing by on the highway, was an overturned car. The twisted metal, the shattered glass, the marks of a violent impact. And inside that destroyed vehicle, trapped among the wreckage, was a person. Someone who needed help. Someone who, without those two puppies insisting, crying, pulling at the hem of their pants, might have gone unnoticed for hours. Or worse, might not have been found in time. And then we need to stop and absorb the weight of this revelation. Because this was no longer just a story about abandoned animals. It wasn't just about 2 puppies loyal to their mother. It was about a chain of events that only makes sense when you look back and realize that every detail had a purpose. The puppies weren't there by chance. They weren't just waiting for help for themselves. They were there because they knew in some inexplicable, but real way that they needed to get attention. That they needed to make someone stop. That they needed to guide someone to that exact point where a human life hung by a thread. Now think about the mindset we carry every day. We go through situations and judge them superficially. We see 2 puppies on the road and think, abandoned. We see a stopped car and think, someone must have already called for help. We swerve, keep going, assume someone will solve it. But the hidden truth is that, often, that other person doesn't exist. Often, you are the only chance. You are the only one who stopped. You are the only one who can make the difference between life and death. And if that person hadn't trusted the strange behavior of those puppies, if they hadn't followed that impulse to go all the way, to understand what was happening, that story would have had a tragic ending. An ending that nobody would want to know. And the most impressive thing is that the animals knew. They had no way to communicate in words. They had no way to clearly ask for help, but they found a way. They stayed by the side of the road, where people passed by. They cried. They insisted. They pulled. They guided. And when someone finally trusted them, when someone allowed themselves to follow that seemingly senseless logic, the truth came to light. And this truth not only saved lives, showed the impact that attention, empathy, and courage can have. It showed that sometimes the signs are there, but we need to be willing to see them. We need to be willing to stop. We need to be willing to trust. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened after that discovery was a race against time. A mobilization. Proof that when we decide to act, when we break through that barrier of indifference, things start to move, because it wasn't just about the puppies anymore. It wasn't just about their mother anymore. It was about a person trapped, wounded, waiting for help that might never come. And those 2 little 4-legged heroes were responsible for changing that. And those two little four-legged heroes were responsible for changing that. Because from the moment the person discovered what was really happening, everything turned into a race against time. There was no more time to hesitate. There was no more time to process the shock. It was time to act. And she acted. Immediately, rescue services were called. Ambulance, firefighters, authorities, everything was mobilized with the urgency the situation demanded. Because there, trapped in the wreckage of that destroyed car, was a person who needed immediate help. And the most distressing thing of all is that this person was conscious. She knew what was happening. She felt the pain. She heard the cars passing on the road above. But she couldn't scream. She couldn't ask for help. She was there, trapped, vulnerable, depending on a miracle. And that miracle came in the form of two puppies who refused to give up. Now think about the magnitude of that. Think about how many hours those puppies were there. Hours, not minutes. It wasn't a quick coincidence. Hours of exposure to danger. Hours of fear. Hours of persistence. Hours of pure and inexplicable loyalty. They could have run away. They could have followed their instinct for self-preservation and sought shelter anywhere else. But they didn't. Because their mother was there. Because someone needed help. And somehow, at that deep level of communication that we still don't fully understand, they knew they needed to get attention. That they needed to make someone stop. That they needed to be the bridge between despair and salvation. And that's the part that touches me most deeply. Because we live in a world where heroism is always associated with grand gestures, dramatic actions, people who appear in the news. But true heroism, the kind that changes destinies, the kind that saves lives, is often silent. It's done by those no one expected. It's done by two puppies on the side of a road who didn't give up. It's done by a person who decided to stop when everyone else passed by. It's done by those who trust in the improbable, by those who follow their instincts even when they seem to make no sense, by those who choose to see beyond the surface. And when the rescue arrived, when the teams began working to remove that person from the wreckage, when the life that hung by a thread was finally saved, those two puppies remained there. Not because they were expecting recognition, not because they wanted to be seen as heroes, but because, for them, it wasn't a choice. It was who they were. It was what they did. It was love in its purest and most selfless form. And this forces us to rethink everything. It forces us to question, what are we willing to do for those we love? What are we willing to risk when someone needs us? How far does our loyalty go when the situation becomes difficult, dangerous, desperate? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this story doesn't end with the rescue. It continues. Because after everything calmed down, after the person was taken to the hospital, after the dust settled and the road returned to normal, someone needed to take care of those puppies. Someone needed to recognize that they weren't just animals in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were heroes. They were the reason a life was saved. And what happened to them, the fate that awaited them, is the continuation of this journey that began with two little beings crying on the side of a road, refusing to give up on the one they loved. And what happened to them, the fate that awaited them, is the continuation of this journey that began with two little beings crying on the side of a road, refusing to give up on those they loved. But before we get there, there's something that needs to be said. Something that definitively confirms the impact of what these puppies did. Because when the rescuers finally managed to stabilize the situation, when the injured person was placed in the ambulance and the area was cordoned off, one of the firefighters turned to those who had stopped and said something that resonated as an undeniable truth. Without the dogs, no one would have seen. Simple as that. Direct. No beating around the bush. No dramatization. It was the technical observation of professionals who make a living saving lives and who know better than anyone how thin the line is between being found in time and never being found. And this validation doesn't come from an emotional place. It's not someone trying to romanticize the story. It's someone with years of experience in rescues. Someone who knows the behind-the-scenes aspects of these situations. Someone who knows exactly what could have happened if those puppies hadn't been there. Because the location was dangerous. It was a blind curve. A point where drivers don't have a complete view of what's ahead. A stretch of heavy traffic where everyone is focused on not crashing, on maintaining speed, on reaching their destination. Nobody is looking down, at the ditch, at the shoulder. Nobody is expecting to find an overturned car hidden among the bushes. And without those two puppies insisting, crying, calling attention, that person could have been left there for hours, or days, or worse. And here's the hidden truth we need to face. We underestimate chance. We think things always work out, that someone always shows up, that it wasn't meant to be this way. But the reality is much harsher. The reality is that there are people who aren't found in time. There are accidents that go unnoticed. There are lives lost because nobody stopped, nobody saw, nobody acted, and that person, trapped in that car, could easily have become just another statistic. Just another cold number in a traffic report. Another tragedy that nobody knew about. But it wasn't. And it wasn't by luck. It was because two animals did the improbable. It was because they transformed instinct into action. It was because they didn't give up. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this confirmation from the authorities isn't just about validating what happened. It's about recognizing that there is an intelligence, a perception, a decision-making capacity in animals that we constantly ignore. We treat animals as if they were incapable of complex reasoning, as if they acted only on impulse, as if they had no idea what they were doing. But this story proves otherwise. These puppies weren't just reacting, they were planning. They were communicating. They were executing a desperate but effective strategy. Staying in a spot where people pass by. Attracting attention. Not giving up until someone understood. And then guiding that person to where help was truly needed. And when you stop to think about it, when you truly absorb the weight of this revelation, it becomes impossible not to question yourself. How many times have we ignored signs? But what if they don't? What if you're the only chance? What if those puppies were waiting precisely for you? What if those puppies were waiting for you? Because that's the twist that changes everything. Those cries echoing by the roadside. Those desperate sounds that most people interpreted as fear, as the despair of abandoned animals, weren't that it. They weren't simply the lament of someone left behind. They were something much bigger. They were a desperate plea for another life. They were the voice of someone who knows they can't give up, even when everything seems lost. They were the silent cry of someone willing to risk everything for someone they love. And when you understand that, when you truly absorb the real meaning of that scene, everything changes perspective. Because those puppies weren't just asking for help for themselves. They were there as messengers, as guardians, as the last hope for someone who was trapped, injured, unable to call for help. And the most impressive thing is that they consciously put themselves at risk. They saw the cars passing by. They felt the wind from the giant wheels. They were almost hit. But even so, they stayed. Because the alternative, abandoning those who needed them, was unthinkable. And that's not basic instinct. That's not simply animal behavior. That's sacrifice. That's loyalty in its purest form. That's love that overcomes fear, that overcomes logic, that even overcomes the very instinct for survival. And here's the profound lesson this story carries. We live in a society that values individualism, that teaches us to take care of ourselves first, that preaches that everyone has to solve their own problems. But these puppies showed something completely opposite. They showed that there is a force greater than there is a connection that cannot be broken, not by danger, not by fear, not by exhaustion. There is a type of loyalty that doesn't negotiate, that doesn't give up, that doesn't abandon. And when you witness this, when you see in practice what it means to be there for someone, even when the whole world is passing you by, you don't come out unscathed. You can't look at your own life in the same way, because the truth is, we are tested all the time. Not necessarily in life or death situations, but in small daily decisions. When someone close to us is going through a difficult time, and we have to choose between being present or continuing with our routine. When we see an injustice and need to decide whether to speak up or remain silent. When we encounter someone who needs help and we weigh whether it's worth getting involved. And most of the time, we choose the easiest path. We take a detour. We move on. We assume that someone else will solve it. But these children didn't have that option. Or rather, they did, but they chose differently. They chose to stay. They chose to take the risk. They chose to be the bridge between despair and salvation. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the impact of this story goes far beyond the rescue itself. It goes beyond the puppies, their mother, the person who was saved. Because when something like this happens, when a story like this comes to light, it forces us to look inward. It forces us to question, what kind of person am I? What kind of person do I want to be? If I were on that road, would I have stopped? And if I had stopped, would I have trusted the improbable? Would I have followed those puppies to the end? Or would I have tried to get them out of there and moved on? Thinking I was doing the right thing, but actually missing the chance to make a difference where it really mattered. These questions are not easy. They affect us because they touch on something that goes far beyond the surface. They touch our essence, our character, the way we see the world, and our role in it. And the truth is that stories like this exist precisely to remind us of something that the rush of daily life often makes us forget. That life is made of moments, of decisions, of choices that seem small at the moment they are made, but that carry a gigantic weight. Because to stop or not to stop, to trust or to doubt, to act or to hesitate, these decisions define not only the destiny of those who need help, but also who we become in the process. And when I look at this story, when I revisit every detail of this journey, the puppies crying by the roadside, the cars passing by, without stopping, the person who finally had the courage to break the discovery of the overturned car, the rescue, the life saved, I realize there's a very clear message here. A message that transcends the obvious, that goes beyond momentary emotion. Because sometimes, the most important warning on the road doesn't come from a sign. It doesn't come from a traffic light. It doesn't come from a siren. Sometimes, it comes from someone who can't speak. It comes from two small beings who only have their own bodies, their own voices, their own persistence to communicate something that no one else was seeing. And if we're not willing to listen, if we're not willing to stop, if we're not willing to trust the improbable, we lose. We lose the chance to save a life. We lose the chance to be part of something bigger. We lose the chance to discover what we are truly capable of when we choose courage instead of indifference. And that's why stories like this need to be told. Not just to move us, not just to make us cry or smile, but to transform us. To change the way we see animals, the way we see the situations around us, the way we see the responsibility we have for each other. Because in the end, we are not alone in this world. We are part of an invisible network of connections, of dependencies, of opportunities to make a difference. And when we choose to be present, when we choose to act, when we choose to be the person who stops, we not only change the destiny of those who are helped, we change our own destiny. We become better people, more complete people, people who know, deep down, that they did what was right when everything called for moving forward. And if this story touched you, if it resonated with your heart, if it stirred something within you that might have been dormant, I invite you to like this video. Because the more people see this story, the more people are impacted by it, the greater the chance that the next time someone is driving and sees something strange, something that seems to make no sense, that person will remember. They will remember the puppies. They will remember the life that was saved. They will remember that stopping can be the difference between everything and nothing. And tell me in the comments, would you have stopped the car? Because I really want to know. I want to know if this story changed something in your way of thinking, if it planted a seed of courage, if it made you question the kind of person you want to be. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Because here we bring more real stories like this. Stories where the most defenseless become heroes. Where the improbable happens. Where compassion overcomes indifference.